I visited the tables at Blackjack and Baijia in Fujing midfield. I tried hard to search for the figure of the elder brother who had helped me. Even a few small factories around Putin have been traveling back and forth repeatedly without success. The elder brother may not come again. He raised his hand and looked at his watch. 2 o'clock in the morning. I secretly wiped out the cigarette in my hand. I was going to see that there were obviously more people in Zhang Lao Hall than I did just now. At first glance, the figure of Mr. Zhang and that woman were gone. The eldest brother Mr. Zhang was not there either, holding the chips in his hand and had no intention. Yulu couldn't get upstairs and returned to the room. Mr. Zhang seemed to have just finished taking a shower, wearing a bathrobe, sitting on the sofa drinking tea leisurely. Mr. Zhang has come to you. Why don't you play for a while? Mr. Zhang picked up the teacup and took a mouthful. I don't know how to play with the chips given by Lao Hao, so I still can't get the money back. I threw it around for a while and lost it. I asked in confusion. What is the refund of money after winning? Skip the teacup. Mr. Zhang replied angrily, you don't understand even if you say it. Although I still don't understand it very well, I dare not ask more questions when I see Mr. Zhang not feeling high. The next morning, Uncle Hao personally finished lunch with us and arranged for a car to take us to the airport. He didn't ask about the game process during the meal, maybe he had expected it. As a result, when I walked out of the restaurant, the bright figure passed by me. Still so cold and arrogant, as if everything in front of him was a transparent person. After returning to Beijing, Mr. Zhou was relatively satisfied with our itinerary. The only regret was that he did not win too much more. Life is back on its original track, visiting, refusing again. Xiaoma, you have been in the company for a year. I have always been positive about your professional knowledge, but the results are not satisfactory. Mr. Zhou threw me a cigarette and pondered for a moment. Brother Hao in Macau should still have a lot of good things in his hand. The spring auction is approaching. I heard Mr. Zhang say that Brother Hao is more intimate with you. I am going to let you go again. Go to Macau. If I can win the customer Uncle Hao, I will be in the company and talk to you. I understood what Mr. Zhou meant, which company would always support me as an idle person. He replied without hesitation, I'll prepare immediately and can set off at any time. This is my last chance and the only chance. Please let me go. On the flight from Beijing to Macau, I was closing my eyes and thinking about Uncle Hao's words, and the sound from my ears was a little cold. Seeing the woman in front of me, I couldn't help but be stunned. Is the world so small? In front of her, she turned out to be the iceberg beauty she had seen in Uncle Hao's hall last time. The short leather jacket and slim jeans have less maturity when they first meet, but more youthful and beautiful. She pointed to the seat next to me, and I quickly moved away and made way out of the passage. Hello, Yao Qiao has met again. He sat down in the seat and frowned. I should have matured in my memory, but have we seen this stranger? I saw you in Putin's hall a month ago. Oh, I don't remember. Before I could continue to describe the scene of that day, I was interrupted by him and picked up the magazine and looked at it. I rubbed my nose awkwardly and continued to close my eyes and rest. Maybe he has seen this way of picking up a conversation too much. Madam, sir, what do you drink? Maybe it was because we were sitting together again at the same age and the plane took off smoothly, the flight attendant asked us at the same time. 2 long fingers sounded at the same time, and I laughed silently. He glanced at me and said nothing. Faced with such an iceberg, I completely lost interest in talking. After drinking in 2 sips, he closed his eyes and prepared to continue chatting with Zhou Gong. As the plane bumped violently, a burst of exclamations came from the side. When I opened my eyes, the orange juice placed casually on the small table was scattered on his legs as the bumps were shattered. Seeing him scrubbing with his hands, I quickly took out a tissue from my pocket and handed it to him. After a brief bump, he unbuttoned his seatbelt and said, "Please let me go out." He took a delicate little trolley case from the luggage rack and walked towards the rear of the cabin. When I opened my eyes, I said, "I'll help you." He raised his hand and prepared to take the box in his hand. "I can do it myself." He refused coldly. I returned and he was still in a pair of jeans, but the color was slightly darker, and he still regained his arrogance and abandoned the shyness he had just now. The plane landed smoothly at the Macau airport, and there was no intersection along the way, just like 2 strangers. Looking at the car he got into the casino reception, I waved to a car and headed to Uncle Hao's office. After expressing his purpose, Uncle Hao lit a cigar and looked at me without comment. "Xiaoma, I was a little short of funds some time ago, so I took out 4 items to prepare to take action. I have recovered the funds these days, and I still feel a little regretful now. These are all my treasures. Uncle Hao's face showed a regretful expression. After hearing this, my heart sank. After a moment of chanting, I said, I can understand Uncle Hao. If it weren't for the tight turnover of funds, no one would be willing to give up. Over the years, I think Uncle Hao must have collected a lot of treasures. I wonder which type of thing Uncle Hao prefers. Last time I came here, the light third-generation official kiln and a painting of Dakian were taken out by Uncle Hao, which was considered a rare work in the eyes of ordinary collectors, but Uncle Hao did not show too much reluctance at that time. It is normal for human nature. If you want to take action, you must choose the collection that you don't particularly like. Judging from the porcelain box taken out by Uncle Hao, there should be various collections in his hand, but it should be judged that Uncle Hao's preference for porcelain and calligraphy and painting should be the lowest. If you want to say, my favorite thing is bronze and jade. The noble characteristics and heavy sense of history of bronze are my only love, and jade can bring people auspiciousness, especially the sense of accomplishment of a piece of old jade. Uncle Hao followed my words and talked. I studied archaeology when I was in college. After graduation, I was fortunate to participate in some protective scientific examinations of ancient tombs during the Shang and Zhou dynasties. My tutor also had a special liking for bronzeware. It infects my preference for bronze. I wonder what treasures Uncle Hao has collected. When I heard that Uncle Hao liked bronze, I suddenly felt energetic. I was my old jade, I like bronze, and I have participated in excavation. After hearing my words, Uncle Hao's eyes lit up and said to me, what unearthed treasures have you seen? Then, before I knew it, I chatted from the office to the wine table. Today, Zhou Qiluoduo told me so much, and I will arrange for you to have a good rest in Putin first. I'll have someone pick you up tomorrow, and come and take a look at my stuff. I have 2 pounds of bronze, but I can't take it for sure, so you can help me cut off the belt. In addition, I have a piece of old jade that I am currently trading, which is a good thing. It has been almost 10 years since I bought it. The afternoon passed quickly, and while the cups were being exchanged, the two became friends of age and did not involve the collection. But I knew in my heart that the task was sold for half. Putin's midfielder once again searched all the gambling tables, but was disappointed again, and there was still no big brother. I touched my pocket and walked into the VIP room last time by Uncle Hao. The first thing that caught my eye was his back, still a person, and a card was still so calm. I see that you are not drunk when you are talking to him, so I deliberately went to find him. Xiao Chen renewed a cup of coffee for me, interrupting my memories. I ate a colorless meal and went to find him in a panic. That soldier, I am the heir, I greeted him kindly, and I was unwilling to accept it. I lifted the quilt and said, come on, go to bed. Xiao Chen put the coffee on the bedside table, looking like he was dying. Are you so strong? I just made the coffee for you, and I went to bed before I finished speaking. Are you so strong? I've gone to carry the sack. Okay, I'm wrong. Isn't it okay for me to interrupt? I'm just curious about what happened later. He shook my arm and said coquettishly, you are really 38. Later, I was angry and threw the 10,000 chips on the string. I could go to bed if I hit it. Who said the bargaining chips? I'm talking about the iceberg. He curled his lips, handed me a cigarette, and lit it for me. That night I vaguely remember that after betting, I gave me a different color of chips with guan pei. Looking at the 2 plastic pieces in front of me, I had been struggling for a long time, whether to continue fighting or stop when I see it. Looking back on the past year, I decided to stop eating braised vegetables. My deskmate and I, a relatively kind-hearted brother, whispered to exchange chips for his cash. The moment we walked towards the account, he looked at me intentionally or unintentionally, unable to tell whether it was ridicule or contempt. In the room, I looked at the 20,000 Hong Kong dollars in front of me, and was full of excitement and counted it over and over again. It's been a year, and I've never spent more than 2,000 yuan in my hand. The only dissatisfaction is the look of the iceberg when he left. After looking at my watch, I put on my clothes and walked out of the hotel. The neon lights of Macau flashed at night, and from time to time, beautiful girls threw their eyes. I cleared my throat and avoided their eyes and left. I think it must be done, and I am not as confident as to let a woman throw herself into her arms. I found a convenience store and bought a few cans of beer, walked to the beach and sat down. There were a few people sitting in groups of 3 or 3 under the big trees next to me. I approached and just raised my eyes and glanced inadvertently. Perhaps they imagined me as a gambler who had nowhere to go after losing everything. Take out the remaining cigarette and light one, turn on the beer, look at the dark sea water, and immerse yourself in your own world. Ji Jing was awakened by a sudden voice, "Brother, can you give me a cigarette?" Next to him was a man in his 30s. He bowed his hands, but his face was filled with fatigue. Seeing that I didn't say anything, he rubbed his hands and said, I lost no point. It's okay if I didn't say it. I couldn't hold it in. I saw that you have it here, so I took the liberty. He took my cigarette, took out his pocket, took out a few and handed it to me. Thank you, can you give me a cigarette? He bowed and said, Macau is really not a good place. Brother, listen to me and leave quickly and don't come in the future. Why don't you know how to leave a way out for yourself? I sighed secretly as he looked at his departure. Who would have thought that more than 10 years later, I was begging for beer and cigarettes from passersby for a cigarette in City of Dreams. The night is lonely and continues to envelop me. Silence was once again interrupted by the continuous lighter sound. Under the moonlight, a woman pressed the lighter several times in succession and threw it towards the beach in anger. Seeing this scene, he smiled gloatingly. At this time, the moonlight just fell around him. If I read it correctly, she would be the iceberg. Seeing the light looming here, he pondered for a moment, and he walked towards me, and I looked at him intently, wanting to see his actions in the next second. When he approached, he pondered for a moment and asked, Can you borrow a fire and use it? A cold tone without any slight ignorance. I didn't say anything, and I nodded my mouth to signal to the side. I thought he would leave immediately after igniting it, but I didn't expect that he sat next to me and gently exhaled a cigarette. I didn't expect this cold woman to smoke so elegantly. Drink your can of beer. After a long silence, he threw a 500 yuan Hong Kong dollar in the box. You can buy a few boxes. Looking at the Hong Kong dollar beside me, I didn't move any action. Then give me another cigarette, iceberg. He threw away the cigarette but with one hand and moved the money in front of me with the other hand. I don't open a convenience store, and I don't sell tobacco and alcohol. I took out the Zhonghua cigarette given by Uncle Hao from another pocket and handed it to him. I don't smoke. He frowned. Do you suck this? I took out the ocean and handed it to him. As a result, I took a sip and immediately threw away the cigarette in my hand and looked at me. What kind of cigarette is this? It looks like an authentic domestic cigarette for 80 cents. Looking at his embarrassment, I replied jokingly, I will smoke a cigarette of 80 cents if I put 10,000 in one hand. I will give him back 50,000 yuan and ask me if I borrow the fire. The sound of waves in our ears was so big and so small that we didn't say anything. After the silence, he spit out 4 words, I'm not a gamble, I'm on a business trip. It's not a gamble. I know you are not a gambler. Your expression and behavior are not labeled as a gambler. Although I didn't see you clearly. But, I feel like you are just a normal person here. That's why I borrowed fire from you. Unexpectedly, after drinking some wine, we were all in a moment of silence. I want to go and play now. Will it be? Are you going? A gust of sea breeze blew. Iceberg stood up with his shoulders in his arms. The wine made his eyes blurred. Aren't you not gamble? Looking at his staggering steps, I was a little worried and got up and chased after him. Back at the VIP room, he looked at me and asked, What's the big one? Since entering the gambling hall, the account room took out 2 million chips, and the profit has now reached nearly 150,000. I thought to myself, fight against God. I just played it myself. Looking at the messy gambling table, I really didn't dare to make any suggestions. Based on feelings, the iceberg did not give in at all. At the gambling table, the dealer and the idol are dancing. I gritted my teeth and said, Then pretend. Putin has always adhered to the method of opening cards with leisure first and then banker. The dealer first opened the idol home at 6 o'clock. At this time, my pressure doubled. The iceberg still maintained his usual calmness and opened the 2 cards casually, 1-2 and 1-6, and it was in sight. I raised my right hand excitedly, but he just smiled slightly and ignored it. I lowered my raised palm again and greeted the PR. I looked at the raised hands, then clenched my fists and made a compulsory gesture to cover up the embarrassment. He ordered the public relations expressionlessly, deposit 2 million to the account room, and let Xiao Jun take the time to transfer the rest to my previous account. Okay, Ms. Zhang, don't worry. The public relations handed over an order and asked him to sign and confirm. After signing the letter, he said to me in an unquestionable tone, I'm hungry, accompany me to have some late-night snack. When I arrived at the restaurant, Iceberg put down his chopsticks and asked, You don't know how to bet, why are you doing in Macau? I really didn't come for a bet, I was on a business trip. I slowly told her the situation. Soon, look at my pendant. After hearing this, he took a pendant from his neck and handed it to me. Don't lose this thing for me, but he ran away. I joked, this ice-type sun-green Buddha statue is very compatible with you. He looked cold. Because of my professionalism, I have paid attention to the Buddha statue hanging around his neck. Iceberg asked in confusion. Is it valuable? Sister, remove the mom. I took this pendant and ran away. I can instantly live a luxury house in Beijing. My mother-in-law said it was his mother who gave him the dowry, and I don't know. I didn't answer, he took it back to his neck. Can you take me with you tomorrow? My husband has an elder who also studies this, but he was very busy before and didn't take me there much. Later, he was idle and had no chance. He lowered his head and said thoughtfully. I like these too, but I just don't understand. Can you take me to see it? He faded away his usual coldness and expressions of anticipation on his face.